My parents demanded I hide my success so my unemployed brother wouldn't feel bad. When I refused, my mom called my boss. Then the ultimate karma hit. Y29 male, work as a supply chain manager for a mid-sized tech hardware firm. It's not a glamorous, movie-like job, but it pays incredibly well, and I worked my way up from the absolute bottom. My younger brother, Caleb. 26 male, exists. Honestly, that's about the most impressive thing I can say about him without lying through my teeth. To understand the sheer insanity of what my mother just did, I need to paint a picture of how things have always operated in my family. I am the oldest. From day one, I was the independent one, which was really just my parents' code word for we don't have to pay attention to you. I was expected to be responsible, mature, and practically raise myself. All of their emotional and financial energy was entirely funneled into Caleb. Caleb was the golden child, the baby, the miracle boy who could do absolutely no wrong, even when he was actively destroying things. When we were kids, I would get grounded for a week if I left my shoes in the hallway. Caleb would take a baseball bat to the drywall in the living room because he was throwing a tantrum, and my parents would just sigh, smile, and say he was expressing his big emotions. I had a strict chore chart starting at age 7: mowing the lawn, doing the dishes, taking out the trash. Caleb didn't even know how to load a dishwasher until he was 17. Birthdays were the ultimate slap in the face. I would get practical, boring stuff. A new winter coat, a pack of socks, maybe a gift card to a bookstore. Caleb would get the newest PlayStation, custom sneakers, and VIP concert tickets. I vividly remember my 15th birthday. I was taking AP Calculus and really needed a graphing calculator. That's what I got, a TI-84 Plus. I unwrapped it while sitting on the porch, watching Caleb, who was turning 13 the next month, rev the engine of the brand new Yamaha dirt bike my parents bought him as an early birthday surprise. But you know what? I learned to stop caring. I realized early on that the universe wasn't fair, and my parents certainly weren't going to level the playing field. So, I put my head down and focused on the only thing I could control, my own future. I studied relentlessly. I got straight A's. I started working at a local grocery store the second I turned 16, saving every single penny in a bank account my parents couldn't access. When I turned 18, the financial spigot was completely shut off for me. My parents didn't give me a dime for college, didn't help with my first apartment, didn't even buy me a mini fridge for my dorm. I went to a solid state school on a partial academic scholarship that I earned myself. I worked 30 hours a week as a night auditor at a hotel, studying behind the front desk at 3 a.m. I graduated in 4 years with a degree in supply chain logistics and a 3.8 gigapascals. Caleb went to college 3 years later. My parents paid his entire out-of-state tuition in cash. They bought him a brand new Honda Civic as a going-away present. They paid his rent for a luxury off-campus apartment. He changed his major 5 times, partied his way through his 20s, and took 6.5 years to graduate with a degree in sociology and a spectacular 2.1 gigapascals. His graduation party had a catered taco bar, a DJ, and 80 guests. My graduation was marked by a text from my mom saying, "Congrats, we're eating at Chili's tonight if you want to join." After college, I started at my current company as a junior logistics analyst making $48,000 a year. I lived in a terrible, 400 square foot studio apartment above a 24-hour laundromat. The walls vibrated every time the industrial dryers hit the spin cycle. I drove a beat-up Toyota Corolla with a broken driver's side window. But I was independent, and I saved aggressively. Meanwhile, Caleb bounced around between random retail jobs, quitting half of them because the managers didn't respect his vibe. He moved back home, living rent-free in his childhood bedroom, still driving the car my parents bought him, and spending his parents' money on video games and weed. I worked my absolute tail off. I came in early, stayed late, volunteered for the complex vendor negotiations nobody else wanted to touch, and made myself indispensable. After 2 years, I was promoted to analyst. 3 years after that, I hit senior analyst, and my salary jumped to $105,000. I moved into a beautiful 2-bedroom apartment in a complex with a gym. I bought myself a certified pre-owned Hyundai Elantra. I was finally breathing. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. Last year, I hit a massive milestone. I bought my first house. It was a modest but beautiful 3-bedroom ranch in a quiet suburb about 20 minutes from the office. I saved the $60,000 down payment entirely by myself. I navigated the inspections, the mortgage approvals, and the closing process completely solo. When I finally got the keys, I felt a sense of pride I had never experienced before. I went to my parents' house to tell them the news. Their response was infuriatingly lukewarm. My mom barely looked up from her iPad and said, "Oh, that's nice, honey, are you sure you can afford that?" My dad just grunted. Zero congratulations, zero pride. But what really made my blood boil happened 2 days later. Caleb casually mentioned at the dinner table that he was thinking about maybe, eventually, looking at apartments. My parents absolutely lost their minds with excitement. They fell all over themselves offering to co-sign a lease, offering to pay his first and last month's rent, and talking about how amazing it would be for him to have his own space. He hadn't even looked at a single listing. He just formed a vague thought, and they were ready to finance his entire life. The tipping point happened 3 months ago at our mandatory monthly family dinner. These dinners are usually agonizingly boring, but this time, my Uncle Arthur and Aunt Helen were visiting from out of state. Uncle Arthur is a great guy, a retired engineer who actually appreciates hard work. During dinner, he asked me how the job was going. I told him the truth. I mentioned that I had just secured a massive contract renegotiation that saved the company nearly $1 million annually, and because of that, I had received a substantial raise, bumping me up to $125,000, along with a promotion to supply chain manager. I wasn't bragging, I was just answering his direct question with factual information. Uncle Arthur was thrilled. He asked me detailed questions about the logistics field, the corporate structure, and my future prospects. We had a fantastic, normal adult conversation. Caleb sat across the table looking like someone had just shot his dog. He got quieter and quieter, violently pushing his peas around his plate, and eventually just pulled out his phone and started aggressively texting someone. My parents noticed immediately. They kept shooting me these venomous, wide-eyed looks, as if I had just stood up and insulted the family name. After dinner, Uncle Arthur and Aunt Helen went to their hotel. I was in the kitchen rinsing plates, when my mom marched in, grabbed my arm, and pulled me into the hallway. Her face was tight with fury. "We need to talk," she hissed. "Sure, what's up?" I asked, genuinely confused. She crossed her arms. "I need you to understand how incredibly selfish you were tonight. The way you went on and on about your job, your money, your little promotion. It made Caleb feel terrible about himself." I actually let out a laugh because I thought it was a bizarre joke. But her eyes were dead serious. "Wait, you're actually mad at me?" Uncle Arthur asked me a direct question about my life. "You didn't have to go into so much detail," she snapped, keeping her voice low so my dad and Caleb wouldn't hear in the living room. "You know Caleb is going through a very hard time right now trying to figure out his career path. He doesn't need to hear about how wildly successful you are, it just makes him feel inadequate. It highlights his struggles." I stared at her, feeling a cold knot form in my stomach. "Mom, Caleb's struggles are that he works 12 hours a week at a vape shop and lives in your basement for free at 26 years old. That is not my fault. I am not going to apologize for working hard and achieving my goals. That is exactly the arrogant attitude I'm talking about," she whispered fiercely. "You need to be more sensitive. Not everyone is as ruthlessly career-driven as you. Caleb needs more time. I am asking you, as his mother, to tone it down. Stop talking about your accomplishments, stop showing off. It creates tension in this family." I stepped back, processing the absolute insanity of her demand. "Let me get this straight, you want me to hide my success? You want me to pretend I'm failing so Caleb doesn't have to face the reality of his own laziness? I am asking for some discretion and humility," she demanded. "Is it really so hard to just be humble for your brother's sake?" "I'm leaving," I said, grabbing my coat. As I walked through the living room, Caleb gave me this smug, victorious little smirk. He knew exactly what Mom was saying to me, and he loved it. I drove home in silence, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. My own parents viewed my success as a toxic problem that needed to be contained. The next week, I channeled all my anger into my work. I took on 2 more high-profile projects. I worked 60-hour weeks. I built a predictive logistics model that caught the eye of the VP of operations. I was a machine. A month later, I decided to treat myself. I traded in my Hyundai and bought a beautiful, slightly used BMW 3 Series, midnight blue, cream leather interior. It was my dream car. I drove it to the next family dinner. When I pulled into the driveway, Caleb was on the porch smoking. He took one look at the BMW, turned around, and walked back inside without saying a word. The tension at the dinner table was thick enough to cut with a chainsaw. Nobody asked about the car, nobody asked about work. We ate in agonizing silence until I finally stood up and said I was heading home early. My mom followed me out to the driveway. She stood in front of the BMW, visibly shaking with rage. "This needs to stop right now," she demanded, pointing at the hood of the car. "You are deliberately rubbing your success in your brother's face. You knew he would see this. You knew it would crush him. You would. You would." I laughed out loud, a real, booming laugh. "Mom, I bought a car with my own money to commute to my own job. I didn't buy it to spite Caleb. Not everything in the universe revolves around him. You are not the sweet boy I raised," she yelled. "You have become an arrogant, flashy, inconsiderate narcissist. You need to be knocked down a few pegs. The boy you raised was invisible." I shot back, my voice finally rising. "You barely raised me. You were too busy wiping Caleb's nose and handing him everything he ever wanted. I built my life from nothing. If Caleb feels like a failure, It's because you made him one by never letting him struggle. Now move, or I'm backing up anyway. She stepped aside, her face purple with rage. I drove away, thinking that was the end of it. I thought we would just have a cold relationship from then on. I had no idea the lengths she would go to in order to humble me. Update 1. 2 days after the BMW incident, things took a terrifying turn. I got to the office at 8 a.m., poured my coffee, and sat down at my desk. 5 minutes later, my boss, Marcus, the director of supply chain, sent me a message. My office, now. Close the door. Marcus is a very laid-back, data-driven guy. He never uses that kind of urgent tone. When I walked into his office, he looked incredibly uncomfortable. He gestured for me to sit down. Liam, I received a very disturbing phone call yesterday afternoon. Marcus said, leaning forward and steepling his fingers. A woman called the main corporate line and demanded to be transferred to the head of the supply chain division. She claimed to be your mother. My stomach instantly dropped into my shoes. My mother? Marcus nodded gravely. Yes, she said she had an ethical obligation to inform the company about your behavior. She claimed that you have been actively stealing credit for junior analysts' work. She told me that your recent vendor contract negotiations were completely fabricated, that you manipulated the financial metrics to make yourself look good, and that you have been emotionally harassing your coworkers to keep them quiet. I felt the blood drain from my face. The room started to spin. I literally felt nauseous. Marcus, I swear to God. Marcus held up a hand. Let me finish. I told her that all of your work is heavily audited and documented, and that we have had 0 complaints from your peers. She got very defensive and told me that I was being manipulated by you. She threatened to escalate the issue to the executive board if I didn't launch a formal investigation into your fraud. I sat there in stunned, horrific silence. My own mother. My flesh and blood. She actually tracked down my company's corporate number, navigated the directory, and called my boss to accuse me of corporate fraud. She tried to destroy my entire career, my livelihood, and my reputation, all because I bought a nice car and her golden child was sad about his own pathetic life. Marcus, this is entirely false. I said, my voice shaking with a mix of panic and pure rage. Every spreadsheet, every email, every contract is tracked in the system. You know my work. I know, Marcus said softly, his expression softening into sympathy. Liam, you are one of the best managers I have. I know you didn't do any of this. But because she made formal accusations of harassment and fraud, corporate policy dictates that I have to report this to HR. They are going to have to do a preliminary review. I wanted to warn you before they reach out. I thanked him, walked back to my desk, and locked myself in a small conference room. I pulled out my phone and called my mother. She answered on the second ring. Hello? She said, her voice dripping with fake innocence. Did you call my boss? I demanded, not even bothering to say hello. Silence on the line, then, a heavy sigh. I don't know what you're talking about. Do not lie to me. I roared, pacing the small room. My boss just pulled me into his office. He told me you called him. You accused me of stealing credit and harassing coworkers. You tried to get me fired. I did not try to get you fired, she shrieked defensively. I just thought your company should know the truth about the kind of person they are promoting. You have been insufferable lately. You are constantly bragging, showing off that stupid car, treating your family like dirt. Someone needed to teach you some humility. By destroying my career? I screamed. By fabricating lies that could get me blacklisted from my industry? Are you genuinely insane? Don't you dare speak to me that way. I am your mother. I was trying to help you realize that money isn't everything. You're dead to me, I said, my voice suddenly dropping to a dead, icy calm. Do you hear me? We are done. Never call me again. Never text me. If you ever contact my company again, I will hire a lawyer and sue you for defamation and tortious interference. Lose my number. I hung up and instantly blocked her. Then I blocked my dad. Then I blocked Caleb. The next morning, I had my meeting with Sarah, the HR director. It was humiliating. Sarah was very professional, but she had to ask me point blank if I had ever intimidated a coworker. I had to sit there for 2 hours while they pulled my server logs, my project files, and my peer review forms. Sarah actually showed me an email. Apparently, after the phone call, my mother followed up with a 3-page, single-spaced email sent directly to the HR department's public inbox. It was an unhinged manifesto. She claimed I had a God complex, that I was a pathological liar, and that the company was in danger of a massive lawsuit if they kept me on staff. Thankfully, my paper trail was bulletproof. Within 48 hours, HR completely cleared me of all accusations. Sarah sent a formal cease and desist letter via certified mail to my mother's house, stating that any further contact with the company would result in immediate legal action for harassment and defamation. When I got home that Friday, I collapsed on my couch and just stared at the ceiling. The emotional toll was staggering. My uncle Arthur called me that night. He had heard through the family grapevine what happened. Liam, I am so deeply sorry, Uncle Arthur said, sounding genuinely disgusted. Your dad called me, trying to defend her. He said she was just emotional and worried about your soul. I told him they were both delusional and that I fully support you cutting them off. Thanks, Uncle Arthur. I muttered, exhausted. For what it's worth, he added, his voice lowering, Caleb is a leech. Your parents are draining their retirement to keep him afloat. They are going to ruin themselves for that kid. You got out, stay out. And that's exactly what I did. Update 2. It has been 2 years since the incident, and the amount of absolute chaos that has unfolded is almost hard to believe. First, let's talk about my life. Getting rid of my family's toxic anchor was the best thing that ever happened to my career. Without the constant anxiety of dealing with my mother's manipulations, I poured my energy into a massive global supply chain restructuring project. It was a massive success. 6 months ago, I was promoted to Director of Operations. My salary is now $190,000 a year, plus a generous annual bonus. I sold my starter house and bought a beautiful 4-bedroom property in a highly sought-after neighborhood. I have an amazing girlfriend who I am planning to propose to by the end of the year. Life is peaceful, quiet, and incredibly fulfilling. Now, let's talk about the karma that hit my parents like a freight train. For the first 6 months after I cut them off, my mother played the ultimate victim. She told extended family members that I had abandoned them because I got rich and forgot where I came from. Most of the family knew she was lying, thanks to Uncle Arthur, who happily told anyone who would listen about the psychotic 3-page HR email she wrote. About a year into the silence, I received a physical letter in the mail. It was 5 pages long, written in my mother's loopy handwriting. I read it out of morbid curiosity. It was a masterclass in narcissistic delusion. She spent 4 pages talking about how much she cried, how much she missed me, and how the house felt empty. Then came the kicker on page 5. She wrote, "If you are ready to apologize for overreacting to my phone call, and if you can promise to be more mindful of Caleb's feelings and not flaunt your lifestyle, we are ready to forgive you and welcome you back into the family." She wanted times to apologize. I literally laughed until my stomach hurt, shredded the letter, and threw it in the recycling bin. A few months later, I ran into them at a cousin's wedding. I was wearing a custom-tailored suit. My girlfriend looked stunning. My parents looked exhausted and aged. Caleb looked exactly the same, slouching in his chair, playing on his phone. My mother cornered me at the open bar. "You can't ignore us forever," she whispered fiercely. "I am your mother. You lost the right to that title the day you tried to get me fired." I replied calmly, sipping my bourbon. "I made one mistake because I was trying to help you." She hissed. "Trying to bankrupt your own son to protect your lazy favorite isn't a mistake. It's a character flaw." I said, "Don't ever approach me again." I walked away, leaving her standing there with her mouth open. But the real twist, the absolute pinnacle of poetic justice, happened over the last 8 months. Uncle Arthur called me recently with the full breakdown of the disaster. Caleb, in his infinite wisdom, decided he was tired of working retail and wanted to be an entrepreneur. Specifically, he wanted to start a luxury lifestyle podcast and a crypto trading agency. Of course, Caleb had zero capital, zero business experience, and zero work ethic, but he had my parents. My parents, desperate to prove that Caleb was just a late bloomer who was destined for greatness, fully funded his delusion. But because they didn't have the cash on hand, they did the unthinkable. They took out a massive home equity line of credit HELOC on their house. They handed Caleb nearly $250,000. Caleb immediately leased a commercial studio space downtown, bought tens of thousands of dollars in high-end audio and camera equipment, and leased a Porsche Macan so he could look the part for his lifestyle brand. He also dumped a massive chunk of the money into some obscure altcoin crypto scheme that a guy on Discord told him about. I'm sure you can guess how this ends. The podcast got a total of 400 listens. The crypto coin rug pulled and went to zero within 3 weeks. Caleb couldn't pay the lease on the studio or the car. He defaulted on everything. Suddenly, my parents were on the hook for a massive monthly loan payment that they couldn't afford on my dad's modest salary. They drained their savings. They drained their retirement accounts. It wasn't enough. 3 weeks ago, the bank officially initiated foreclosure proceedings on my childhood home. That's when my blocked phone finally rang with an unknown number. I answered it, thinking it was a vendor. It was my dad. He sounded broken, old, and desperate. "Liam, please don't hang up," he begged. "We are in serious trouble. We are going to lose the house. Caleb made some bad investments. We have nowhere to go. I know you're doing incredibly well at your company. We need a loan, just to catch up on the mortgage. Family helps family, Liam. Please." I sat in my spacious, sunlit office, looking out at the city skyline. I thought about the 3-page email my mother sent to HR. I thought about her telling me I needed to be knocked down a few pegs. I thought about the graphing calculator and the dirt bike. "Dad," I said, my voice completely void of emotion. 2 years ago, Mom called my boss and tried to get me fired. She told him I was a fraud. She told him I was a liability. If she had succeeded, I wouldn't have a job right now. I wouldn't have money to give you. She was just confused. He sobbed. She didn't mean it. Please son, we are going to be homeless. You aren't my family, I replied smoothly. You are Caleb's family. I highly suggest you ask him to use his crypto profits to buy you a tent. I hear the market is very humbling right now. I hung up the phone. According to Uncle Arthur, the house goes to a public foreclosure auction next month. They are currently packing up their belongings to move into a tiny, cramped 2-bedroom apartment. Caleb, of course, is moving with them, complaining the whole time that the apartment complex doesn't have covered parking. As for me, I just closed on a beautiful beachfront condo as an investment property. And to celebrate my latest promotion, I bought Uncle Arthur a vintage Rolex he had been eyeing for years. He's the only family I need. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel out and allows us to bring you even more awesome stories. Thank you so much for watching.